Well, hello, hello. We are back for another Other Ink Thursday. I'm Matthew Orr of Wet Ink Games, and this time I have called up Kaylyn McCoy Hyde of M&K Publishing. She's a sales representative over there, and really intimately involved in publishing books, because Kaylyn connects us to our printers. Kaylyn, hello.
Hi, thank you so much for asking me to be on today. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I mean, you're like I said, you're such an integral part of I publish TTRPGs, so like it's
Sure.
like you got to put out the books at the end of the process. Like there's all the artists and the writers and the layout process, and all of those are different professionals, and then somebody's got to make the physical books, and
Sure.
there's one more person to interface with between us and them. So that's you. Hello.
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely important to have somebody like me in this kind of role where you're able to educate on the, process as a whole, especially with different companies, because every single company has their own processes. So that's something I feel like is really key and something I can kind of bring to the table besides just production, obviously, which is always
Yeah.
great. But having at least a little bit of education on that side for everybody.
Yeah, we definitely want to like educate the viewers for sure. But I think uh can we start with like what do how do you describe what you do? I guess is a good place to start.
Okay. So I consider myself a book manufacturer, even though my company name is publishing. We are not traditional publishers because I do work hand in hand with my manufacturer. So basically, the one that I run a lot of What Ink games through is Jostens, which is my main manufacturer. We've been with them for many, many years. Um, So basically, I take in projects as people reach out to me or as I connect with them. I kind of have to learn the process of what they're looking for. So I feel like that's really key is building that relationship and saying, okay, what are you looking for? What are you trying to stand out? Are you wanting to have different levels? What is your crowdfunding like? So kind of growing that relationship up front, and then I help with file setup. I have a lot of different people that I can put people in contact with. So kind of just build a little network to be a one stop if possible. I do not work overseas, so that's been like one thing that's kind of sad because I can't do a lot of the board games and stuff like that that
Yeah,
China
yeah,
gets to
yeah.
do. But books are my thing, and I've really honed in on that. I have a really good set of people that I work with and feel really confident in. So I feel like really that's what I do day to day. Just take it in, educate people, talk to them, find out what they're looking for, and then sit down and say, okay, here's like a Cadillac version. Here's some other quotes on what might be a little bit more cost effective. And especially, in your world, kind of planning down the road. What does that
Mm,
look like? Doing a lot of pricing, kind of back and forth, figuring that out, and then waiting until that whole process is done. Um, I'm like, I love it. I think it's great to start at the beginning of a project. I much prefer that, even though it's a longer funnel time or whatever,
sure,
before the
sure.
turn. But to me, I get to help in that process to make sure that it's set up to the most cost effective that it can be going in. Because a lot of
Yeah,
times, if the files are already done, they're kind of stuck at that
right, right.
point. If they chose a trim size is a little different, they are maybe paying a couple grand more, than what they would if we would have caught it earlier. So
Sure. I mean,
you guys
that's
are smart in
a
that way.
couple grand is a lot for
A
the
lot.
small scale that most of the people that
Mhm,
that I know well in the industry work on,
mhm.
that's a big difference.
Yeah, they're
So
hugely key.
So we're going to get into some more details there, but I'd like to back up. And now that we know a little bit about what you do, like what you say you're a book person and you just really love it. Like, how did you come to be someone who is a production house like this? Like, like you're on the playground, kids are playing hopscotch or whatever, and you're like, I want to make books. Like, is it as early as that for you, or does it, how did you get to this point?
Sure. Well, my dad actually was running M&K Publishing. He started that when I was 5 or 6. So really I did grow up in it. My first job was working for M&K Publishing,
Nice.
and doing all the filing, and we were homeschooled, so we went on the road all the time to all of his meetings. And I also was in the plant quite a bit, like in Jostens. They had a plant in Pennsylvania that was home for us when I was a kid, and so all up in the equipment, meeting everybody. I had one lady do like a book club with us, so I would get like pizza parties if I read a certain amount of books. And just a really integral part of my childhood was books, right? Um, Funnily enough, I kind of got away from it for a little while before my son was born. I was like, I don't know if I want to work with my dad. I kind of hit that like, is this really what I want to do? Um, but when I came back, my son was about 5 months old, and I realized that I could work from home and be there for him
Mm.
if I would follow in my dad's footsteps. And he offered again for me to work with him and started training me then on actually taking over the company at some point. So that's it just kind of happened organically, just kind of kept going. And I don't know, I've always loved books, and I do think it's really cool. The process alone, just walking into the plant, the smell, the people, and how that all comes together is just so incredibly neat to me. I'm just
Yeah.
kind of nerdy about it.
Sure. I mean, that's great that you're nerdy about the thing you do. Like
Yep.
that's a thing. So I want to ask so many questions already, but like,
Sure.
what kind of books are your favorite books? Like, what are you like? What's on your shelf? I know you've got some samples of your projects back in the background there, but like, is it like what's on your shelf? What kind of books do you really like to read
Well,
or to collect or whatever, you know?
I'm in 2 different book clubs, so I like to, I like to stretch myself really thin outside of work, but actually reading. So right now, I'm really loving, like, almost like a fictional genre where it's like dragons and fairies and like all that kind of stuff. I really get into that kind of that magical world where I can kind of disconnect from reality. But my one book club really does. They get in deep. Like every month's a different genre. So we're like doing autobiographies, and right now we are doing like a historical type fiction
Okay.
book. So I'm excited to kind of jump into that. I don't think I've ever really read that genre before. So those are
Okay.
fun. What I buy and what I gravitate towards in my own company is hardcover books. Um, I think they are just timeless,
Mm.
So if I'm ordering a book for book club, 9 times out of 10, I'll get the hardcover version because I love seeing it on my shelf. I love reading it and holding it. I like figuring out what they did, what paper did they use, what cover material, and it's just really fun. So that's kind of where I gravitate.
Yeah. That makes sense. So the other thing that I was thinking about, and this kind of maybe leads into the next um topic a little bit, is like what we talked about. You talked about being in the factory and seeing that process. Like I know almost nothing. Like I've seen the like in movies, you'll see like the print the newspapers on the printer, and then this title spins up, like Joker escapes again, blah, 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 So like
Yeah,
that's my like a pop culture context is the only context I have for what it's like to be in a place where they manufacture books. Like,
yeah.
so what is it like? What kind of scale is this? What kind of like I don't know. I know nothing about it. So tell us something about what the process is of actually producing, you know, we've laid out a design file and we email it to somebody and then, you know, 4 to 6 weeks later, a stack of printed things come. What happened in between while we weren't seeing it?
Yeah. So scale wise, let me just start there. Jostens has railroad tracks that go in through the back of their
Mm,
building. That is how large scale that building is. It can house a railroad track.
yeah.
And that's actually where we unload our paper. We get it in giant rolls, so we have to have storage enough for giant rolls of paper. Um, Literally taller. It's just insane. Like the amount of volume that they can fit in that facility. It's quite mind blowing, honestly. But it saved our lives during COVID because we had to stock up as much
Mm,
as we could because when you could get it.
yeah.
Um, but basically, as far as like some of my other places are smaller, so it just kind of
Sure.
depends on where they're at. But the presses are really, to me, like one of the most impressive parts because you have these men that are just, they are in charge of making sure the color that you guys saw on your proofs is what comes out at the end. And that is all their eye. Like, yes, there's a color curve, there is something that people can work off of, but they are, I mean, if they're good at their job, we have a good product. And to me, I think that's incredibly neat to just see the people that have those skills that they've really honed in over these years, and being able to kind of celebrate them, and watch their products come off, I think is incredible. Um, from start to finish the process, there's a lot that goes into it, kind of behind the scenes for sure. Um, Probably the most annoying part for everybody involved is the proofing stage, where it's like trying to figure out, is everything right? Is everything done correctly, set up correctly? That tends to be where most of my jobs hit like a lag, is like once
Yeah.
it proofs, like how much needs done after that. Um,
Because like the
Definitely,
proofs are like I mean, if you're doing offset print, I mean that's mostly what I'm sure you deal with, and
yeah.
you got to make the plate. So like what is the plate made of, and how
Yeah.
does it get made? Like I don't know.
Well, that process has changed a lot. When I was a kid, I would actually hang out with people that plated, and they would actually burn like these giant plates made out of metal. And they're still like that. They're still manufactured in that same way, but now they're digitally etched. So they're not like giant, having to turn it and flip it and burn it. Like, it does it a lot more automated now. And it allows for us to reuse the same material. So we
Hmm.
haven't had to like have as much waste at that point. Very unique, very interesting how they can kind of wash it. Bizarre to me. And watching that process, I am
S-
not smart enough to figure it out.
So it's not like laser etched. It's
No, it's
like
like stamped almost onto it
hmm,
and then used. So like a dye kind of,
yeah.
but like we don't save plates anymore. That used to be a huge thing, is people would save the plates and then customers would like reuse them on reprints. But now with this process, we just start over basically, like just pull the file, re-etch it onto the thing and go. So still very much manual as far as that goes. I think the funny part to me, or the part I try and portray to people, is how much is still hand work. You know, People still loading book blocks onto a bindery line, and if they turn it the wrong way, then your book's upside down. And that was just
Mhm.
like literally just human error. So there's so many human hands that touch that process, and like hundreds of hands in the whole process once it leaves. So the fact that some of these books come out looking just stellar, to me, I'm like, bless. We're off to a good start here, people. But yeah, the process itself is incredibly cool. Bindery, we have a dust jacketing machine now, which is incredibly cool. To kind of watch, like we can dust jacket like hundreds of thousands of copies
And
in a
I
short amount
assume
of
that
time.
means like you've got the dust jacket wraps around and folds in, so
Yes.
it does it all by machine that like
Yeah, so it like
folds it and
folds one
puts it in.
in, pops the book in, and then closes the book while folding this one in automatically.
Huh.
Just like so cool.
And
Very like kind of satisfying, I guess, in a
yeah,
way, like kind of watching that go. Some of the processes are just very loud and messy, bindery being one of them with the sewing. The sewing machine alone is just very, very messy. Like just that whole area in the plant is just like loads of waste and stuff. So that gets a little overwhelming to me because I'm like, where's the broom? Has anybody clean this up? That'd be great. But
I mean, is
like,
that like got to wear the ear protection things in
yes,
that area kind of stuff,
yeah,
like hard
like
hats walking around in the building, or is it
at
like
least
clean
goggles.
room kind
Yeah.
of stuff?
We
Like,
have clean rooms. The plating room has to be clean because there is a lot of dust from like trimming the paper. Because everything has to be trimmed down,
yeah,
especially on offset, because every single trim size, like we only have certain sizes that we sheet the paper to. So then if it's a different size, it has to be all trimmed out. So a lot of dust and a lot of things. The ink is something that's been really different and unique as I've grown up in the business.
yeah.
It has gone to mostly UV ink now, which is incredibly better for our environment. Like, just, I mean, the amount of waste that they had before with the big drums of ink, and it would be like, I don't know if you've ever watched like movies where they're like sucking blood out of multiple people and putting it into something, but like those giant tubes, like just hooked up everywhere. And the fact that it all came out and was like, making actual colors was just always crazy because you have just your primaries at that
Yeah.
point. Um, so that's been unique. I've been really excited to kind of watch that change. I'm really happy with some of the changes that we've made across the board to become a little bit more eco-friendly.
Yeah.
Um, and like, because that's my whole thing as I've gotten older in this. I'm like, how can we make this more friendly? Because like my
Sure.
dad printed everything. He would have stacks and stacks of paper everywhere. So trying to kind of bring it more into like a digital age, and that's what the plant's doing as well. So I have a feeling it'll probably be all UV ink here in the next couple of years, which is still
So,
cool.
what does that mean? I don't, again, I'm the complete novice here about all this
So
stuff, so I don't know what UV,
the,
like, I mean, obviously ultraviolet is
yeah.
UV, but like UV ink, I mean, that's not like the glows
So
in the
the
dark one that you see on stuff. Like,
No, we do have those, which are very
yeah.
cool. But this is mostly the application process and how they can store the ink and how quickly it dries.
Hmm.
So UV ink goes on just like how you would print out of a printer.
Hmm.
It comes out dry. So even on a coated sheet, we hardly ever have to wait for it to dry anymore. It just comes right through. So turn time alone has been hugely affected by that, and just the fact that we can get a lot more ink out of the UV inks as well. So we're not having to purchase not have to purchase quite as much,
Hmm.
or store quite as much. And just in general, it's made a lot more ecologically friendly than what we were dealing with. So it's kind of it's very much like a printer at home, but
Yeah,
just
it's
like on
just,
a giant
yeah,
seven
yeah, just
tower scale. I have
sure.
some pictures I could send you if you wanted to see kind of what it looks like inside. Um,
Sure. We could edit those into the video during this time that we've been talking if you do that.
yeah, if they want to, I mean, if you want to show it, it is really cool. Of course, we can't show like projects as they go through because it's
Sure.
copyright, but I
Sure.
do take some general pictures that kind of show it, and it's at the scale of a press is really that there's nothing like it. There's nothing like seeing it. It's like I would assume watching a car get made, like just like the
Yeah.
sheer volume um of the
Well,
equipment is just wild.
and I mean, for some of your, you talked about the paper comes in rolls that are delivered by train because that's how many are coming in at a time. Like,
Hmm.
and I'm sure it's the same on the other end, like, or maybe trucks or whatever, but it's like you're packing up boxes of books. Like, I mean, you've got to have boxes coming in, you got to have like people putting the box or machines or something putting the books in the boxes and sealing the boxes and
People,
stacking up the boxes, and then the
still people, isn't that
forklift
crazy?
putting the stacks of boxes on
Hmm.
pallets into the backs of trucks and
Hmm.
going out the door on the other end.
Yep. We use mostly FedEx. So FedEx will come and drop trailer loads or just trailers in our parking lot at the back, and they just line it all up. And nine times out of 10, we fill them up each day, and they come and pick them up and they take them out. We do have some other companies that are like for really unique jobs where we're looking at 20,000 copies or several truckloads. Sometimes there's a few different companies that we try and work with to make it a little bit more cost effective because that is something that we have to, people have to pay for it to get shipped, and it's
Right.
really frustrating.
Yeah,
Because of course
shipping is,
FedEx is they can make their pricing now, really. UPS and FedEx, like they have the corner on the market in a lot of ways. So
yeah.
they're able to just be like, this is it. This is how expensive it is, take it or leave it. So that's been interesting. I think we're actually, the manager was talking about maybe re-talking to FedEx because it has been so fluctuating.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, there are people, there's a whole shipping department that is their whole job is moving things in skid loaders up on shelves, especially during yearbook season because Jostens is a yearbook company. So as schools finish, instead of like for my world, everything has to come in all at once and tidy and ready to go. For yearbook, they can't really do that. So we'll get covers in like December when the kids are done setting it up in the first couple of quarters, and then the rest of the pages come in closer to this time of the year. So they have to like store all of these covers or all the pages as they print them and as forms or whatever come in.
Yeah.
Very huge amount of volume back there. so stuff does get lost.
Sure,
I've
sure.
had that happen, which is unfortunate, but a lot of times, I mean, it's just, ugh, it's crazy. And we also have like hole punching, and then you have people that have to hand do the dust jackets because, like, an 11 by 11 huge book, like, we can't obviously dust jacket that in equipment. So everything has to be done by hand at that point. Um, Really cool, just a little side note.
Yeah.
This, like this type of cover
Oh,
where it
with
has,
the
like, all of the foil
embossed, yeah.
stamping and the embossing and everything, this is completely done by hand. So, the everything is stamped by hand, like, this one had little, like, spine hubs, which is, like, basically a debossing, and they do that all by hand. So, that part to me, when I go in the cover department and I watch, like, metal being heated and impressed and foil and burnishing where they actually burn the material, um, just mind blowing what they can come up with. Literally,
Yeah.
our cover department is one of my most favorite things because yes, the color is great and I love all the text, but the covers are what draw people in. So being able to have a lot of options for me is just like candy. It's one of my favorite things about gaming books, honestly, is that covers are unique and everybody
Yeah.
wants a different feel.
Yeah, the feel is like I imagine that the book you just showed there has like a leatherette style
Yep.
cover feel to it, I imagine.
Mhm.
And that
Yep.
obviously is something different than just a slick, glossy
Oh
cover.
yeah.
But yeah, the amazing I don't know if you worked on Thousand-Year-Old Vampire, but that book is sort of famous for a lot of cover texture and like it's sort of embossed in areas, so it parts of them I mean, it's supposed to look like an old library book that you
Yeah.
found, so it has all these different stamps on it that are like different library owner like
Cool.
logos, but they're all like embossed at different weights so that like it looks like it's been layered up. And even though
Yeah.
it's obviously printed and manufactured, it kind of gives that impression of
Wow.
like distress and different things. And it's got foil on it, and I
Sure.
think it glows in the dark too. It's like it's got everything on the cover. It's a very fancy production.
They probably spent quite a pretty penny on that one because if you think about it, every application's a different hand, right? So it's a different amount of time that you're putting into each cover. So handwork is always like a huge cost
Yeah,
suck on a job because it's
because
just like it's
if
just out there and like humans have to do it. So it's like,
you could.
you can't really plan for that. It's just
Sure.
what
I
it
mean, if
is.
you've got to have the person pressing down on the thing, that's how many
Mhm.
times can one person do that? And that's the
And the
hourly rate, and that's what it
breakage and,
is.
like,
And
if the die breaks, like, dyes are extremely expensive too, so, like,
mm,
if they were doing that many different dyes, like, yikes. Because
yeah,
like, embossing and debossing dyes can run, like, $500-$600, like, expensive. Foil isn't as bad, but, like, it's a little bit easier, but the the embossings are that's where I'm like, "Ooh, yikes." You get
uh,
those costs, you're like, "I'm sorry." Big low.
that's what it is. No, before you say that that's what you were going to do on your crowdfunding page. Um,
Yeah.
so you've speaking of crowdfunding, and you mentioned working with the different covers for the different role playing game books and stuff like
Mhm.
that. How long has that been part of what you do? Because that's sort of like obviously my big connection and Wet Ink's connection with you, and but
Mhm.
like and we met you through Robert Turk, and
Yeah.
he introduced us. So like thank you to Robert. And I mean he tells everybody about you. So like it's you've gotten more work over the years, but like how is Robert your first client like that, or is it like how did you get into, like, doing stuff that isn't I don't know, I mean, I wanna say traditional book puzzling, but,
Yeah.
like, I don't even know, like, this specific sort of subgenre of books.
Yeah.
How did you get
Very
into that?
unique. Very unique subgenre. None of the other reps do anything like I do in this side because it is very Robert was my first.
Mm,
I feel like he met somebody at a conference because I do a lot of work with like homeschool community and things like that. That was where my dad started his company, really was in that industry. So they do a lot of conferences. Um, and I do a lot of hardcover books for many of them. So I think Robert met somebody through there, and he just called me out of the blue one day and was like, "Hey, this is what I do. Like, can you work some quotes for me?" And I was like, "Yes, so cool." So we worked through, I think, like 4 or 5 different quotes right at first, and we kind of honed it in with samples and figuring out what he was looking for. And when his files came in, it was like, the files, I think, alone are just so intriguing to me. My assistant and I both, we just like pour over the books when they come in because the color and the contents all just so intriguing. Um, and just, I don't know, it kind of fit my age range. It was like, I was over the moon. And that was right before I actually took over the company. So this was about 6 years ago, I
Yeah.
think, that I met him. And then I met Brandon, and it was just, oh my word, it's just been amazing since then. How many people? And then I started offering that discount or to that one. Is it IGDN, I believe?
That's it. That's it. The
Yep.
Indie Game Developer Network.
Yes, there it is. So I started offering that, and then it was like gangbusters from there. And that's just, to me, it was just so incredibly cool to be able to offer something to get all of these indie authors in, and give them a home. And so far, it's been really, really amazing. And everyone's just so nice to work with. But yeah, that's how I broke into it. It was just
Yeah.
out of the blue one day. And, by building that relationship with him and making him happy, then it led to more business. And that's literally how I grow my company now. I hardly ever
Sure.
market or anything. It just kind of comes in because of how long we've been in business now, too. Um, which is very nice, not gonna lie.
Yeah. Sure.
I
Sure.
don't take
Just
that for granted at all because I think it's the biggest form of a compliment when someone's like, "Hey, here's who I worked with, this is somebody you could work with." Because there were a couple of my wedding vendors I would not say the same about, you know? So I'm like, when it comes down to time where everyone's like, "Hey, this is a good person to work with," that to me is, I've done a good job.
yeah, of course. I mean, and,
So,
and I mean, you can't buy word of mouth or whatever. It's I don't know if that's a
so
phrase,
different.
but that's a definitely it's a
So
best
true.
it's the best form of marketing or whatever. Um,
Mhm.
so do you play any of these games or do you know but you say you look at them and you pour over them and it's like I mean I'm not trying to be like I don't know rude or anything like that, but like you like pouring over them
I have
like
no idea what I'm looking at.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like you're like oh this one looks great. This is a good I would play this or you're like interesting layout choices, like where is the
I'm very color driven because that is like something I specialize in. So the colors and how like the layering is done on the design, like that to me is what catches my eye. Now I am married to a gamer, so he
okay,
loves being able to kind of look at what I'm doing. So I feel like, and now my son's really getting into it too because he's almost 10. So he's really starting to branch into the gaming world, and he's always like, "Mom, you did that. That's cool." I was like, "Well, thank you." Yes, I know. But to me, I don't actually game very much. I'm not huge on it. I'd rather read.
sure.
But man, the files and just learning about the characters, really, it's very cool to me. It's just like reading a story brand new,
Hmm.
but I know everybody knows them. But I like the women warriors, like just all the
Sure.
fun stuff. I just connect to it through more of the content wise,
Oh,
more than the
and
game.
yeah, and I think you mentioned that you do graphic novels too. Like, so I'm sure that's a similar sort of.
Mhm.
I mean, those are like not that there's no words in a graphic novel, but like it's very art, very visual,
Huge,
for that kind of stuff.
huge.
So,
Yeah, those I love those. They are sometimes one of my harder projects to do, because they are so detailed in how they want their color, especially if I'm working with the actual artist. So if it's an
hmm,
art book that has been painted and then photographed and turned into a digital product, those are the ones that just I have to hang on for the ride because I know like I want to make them happy, but it's never gonna duplicate exactly the same. It just
sure,
can't because you're taking a picture of it and the lighting and the material and whatever. I mean, there's so
right,
many different
right.
things that could change it, but they are beautiful, but they are also the ones when they come in, I'm like, "Shh, okay, everybody's happy. We're good." They have their books, and they do take some of the longest. Is the heavy art books because they just are time consuming for everybody. involved in the proofing process and everything, but the colors and the way they do them is always so cool and just a great showcase piece. But I always show off my game books too because I think they're beautiful. And these
Yeah.
are the little books are new author. They're actually like a little bit on the more I don't want to say spicy side, but they're a little
Mm.
bit more on that the other end of the genre where it's more for woman geared. So I've never printed anything like that before, so that was huge for me to kind of break into that market. I tried to get with them for like 2 years, 3 years. I would just send them emails, hey, let me know if you ever get sad or you want to see a quote or something. And they came back, and I ended up doing 4 titles for them right out of the gate, which was I was shocked. So it just kind of seems like little genres like that I'm starting to kind of get into, which I think is incredibly cool because I love my dad and all of his really traditional books, and the homeschool market and everything is incredible and they are very solid. But I love the unique. I love
Hmm.
finding that the space in a budget to try and make it beautiful without it being crazy expensive or
Yeah.
just ideas. Like I love bouncing ideas off of people. And that's where the gaming industry or really the indie industry really comes in because it's just really they need that unique edge
Yeah. Well, and
to
the
get out
you
there.
said budget too. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
the indie especially is trying to do things on the thinnest of margins, the thinnest of margins.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, there's kind of two questions I think I want to ask next, but like
Sure.
sort of like can you talk about you mentioned before like about the budgeting and about the like the template size that you can if you choose a paper size that doesn't have to be cut that drops out a step and if you know that at the beginning then like that
Hmm.
kind of stuff. Can you kind of like give some tips or something for that and or not necessarily like tips but like what kind of things are you thinking about when you start to work with somebody about that production in part of it and then maybe either as part of that or then whatever, take one first then the other. But like I kind of want to hear about one, like, can you walk through a whole project? Like
Hmm.
this, we did this, and then we did this, and this has this, and I don't know, like what's the
Sure.
as like a case study, I guess,
Sure. Yeah. As far as tips and tricks, I actually made sure on my website I have like that whole tab that just is like talking about production, basically. So it has trim sizes and paper and all that kind of stuff because that to me is invaluable information if you're just starting, to kind of look at that and say, hey, if this is a traditional size in like these three companies or in M&K Publishing and the 4 or 5 people that they work with, then maybe I should like lean towards that area or maybe I should ask about it. Because yes, a unique size is really fun, but it is also a lot of where you can lose money
Mhm.
because your unit price is higher and you don't make as much. So, like an 8.5 by 11 book, we pre-purchase cartons and boards and paper and everything at that size. So you're able to access all of those things that are purchased in bulk.
Mhm.
Now, if you go at like an 8 by 10, then we're trying to take an 8.5 by 11 sheet and create it down to an 8 by 10. So already you're going to have more spoilage and paper and a little bit more time in the production process. Different cartons. Cartons are actually huge. They're extremely hard to price. Like when I'm talking cost to people, the cartons are really what kind of snag me because they are constantly changing. It's just a matter of like what they decided to charge that day. And so if you're ordering like really unique sizes, like you are at their mercy at that
They
point
gotta pay.
because you can't buy as many 8 by 10 cartons if you're not sure how many 8 by 10 jobs you're gonna have, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that's probably the most key process I think is like looking at something like I also have like a PDF that kind of has standard sizes and paper and things like that that could be a really good trick to say, hey, let me look at this and see what they might have. Um, Other than that, I mean, it's so case by case. Every single
Mm.
book is so unique. And I think that that to me is what I love because it's not humdrum, run of the mill, cut paste. Like every project has its own uniqueness, whether it's the different page count, the different size, what kind of cover they wanted, what kind of board thickness they wanted, what kind of binding. we ended up going with. I mean, so every single thing has its own different price bracket and places that I can manipulate it and say, okay, so if we are needing a little bit less money in this area, let's try this, you know. And I do a lot of quote. I love doing quotes, multiple quotes, especially for indie authors, like kind of giving them wide ranges of, hey, here's what you could do for this size. Here's what you could do for this size. Here's the different cover options. You know, because I love for everyone to have a full idea of what they're getting into. So that way, especially when you're crowdfunding, you know. As far as a cool project to walk through, I mean, do you care if I talk about the Black Ballad?
I
That's
do
been
not
my
I don't
that's
care
been
at
my
all.
biggest
Like
one.
I know one of the contributors to the project, so I've heard about
Yeah.
the Black Ballad before, so I would love
Yeah.
to hear about it from your perspective.
Yeah. So basically, from my perspective, I got to meet the actual artist, so the graphic designer who was dealing with this project. I met her. We had coffee. I courted her for a few years too, where I was just like, "Hey, you know, how's it going? Checking in, giving quotes, you know, because it's just this. I want to say this project took her about 3 years,
Hmm.
all in all, from like the very first time we talked to when it actually came in. Um,
That's easy. At least that long.
Yeah, easily. Oh, yeah, I don't even know how long she was working on it before.
Right.
Um, but so like the beginning process, a lot of quoting, a lot of samples. I feel like samples are how I sell books, right? Because that is what people need to see. And we're unfortunately we don't do like a bound copy beforehand, and that's what a lot of people are accustomed to from China. It's just not cost effective for us in the States, unfortunately, which I hope one day changes, but for now, you know, it's just pieces. So I'm trying to show somebody how their book is going to look out of pieces. Um, so that's where sample books come in. That is key. So I took her a lot of samples, and that also helps you kind of get an idea for what's available. And I can kind of say, hey, you know, foil is expensive with the dye, right? Or hey, UV is a little bit cheaper. Um, so for them, we ended up changing specs up to the very last day. Like the very last day, they ended up removing something that she had files set up and everything for, but it just cost wise at that point, it just didn't make sense for them. So that does happen. Does not make me upset at all. You know, I want people to be happy and in their budget. I don't want anybody
Right.
stretched
Right.
thin. Um, so for this one, we quoted, did a lot of back and forth. I did a lot of review of the files for her as she was putting them together. A really key factor I feel like is having someone knowledgeable kind of keep an eye on how it's getting set up, because if you finish the entire project and then all of your margins are too tight up to the edge of
Hmm.
the paper and you're going to lose wording or graphics, then you're back to square one. You know, you're having to
Right.
go
Right.
page by page. And I am a designer myself, self-taught, but I do have InDesign and Photoshop and all that good stuff. So that actually helps me be able to be a little bit more, I think, helpful to my clients when they come in, is because I kind of know, hey, here's what to keep an eye out for. Um, or I'll go through it and say, hey, your page number is like right here. That is not going to work. You know, got to keep it in the margin or it's going to get cut off. You know, so
So,
I did a lot of that review with
where's your
her.
favorite place for a page number?
My favorite place, I really like the outside edge, but it needs to be inside. So my least favorite is when they try and put it in the art. I feel like that's just really, I don't know. I don't love it. I'm not sure why. I like it to have its own autonomy, its own area.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But the spacing is super key. Because when you are trimming down huge
Hmm.
signatures, there can be a variance. It's no more normally than a 16th of an inch, but that actually matters. You know,
Yeah.
if your page number was like right on the edge and then they under trim it a little bit, your page number might be like right there. Now, we do say that, right? If the file comes in and we see something that blatant, we're like, oh, you know, move it in.
Yeah.
Um, but sometimes it's like right on the edge of where we wouldn't maybe say something, and then the client might be unhappy with how close it is. So margins and file setup is just that's how you get a good book, honestly.
Hmm.
Which you all know that. The graphics aren't lost on you guys. Um, so
Yeah.
basically for her, they ended up foil stamping everything. So
Wow.
you can see like this is all shiny foil.
Mhm.
They foiled all of the wording on their cover, which actually turned out pretty good. Like you can actually read the wording on the back, which I was really
Yeah.
happy
It
about
it's
because
a
it's
nice
kind of small.
dark art, so then the
Yes.
silver text does stand out.
Yep, and she did it the perfect size. I don't think I would have taken it any smaller than that because I think it would have started to plug up, but they did a really good job. She nailed it. And then they also added like some UV elements. I don't, that's going to be hard to see, but they
Yeah.
kind of called out different pieces in the cover with UV. And then the cool part, they
Yeah,
gilded.
they
They
gilded,
gilded all
yeah.
the edges, which just has a special place in my heart. It's just so cool. Um, Anyway, so
I mean, that's
we
like a classic, I don't know if this was printed at Jostens, but that's like a
yeah,
classic yearbook kind of
mhm,
touch where it's like
yep,
also it's gilded edges.
yeah. Now, Jostens is where I do most of my hardcovers. Their application cover department unmatched to their pricing. So I can get other people to do it. It's just either I'm not happy with how it comes out or their pricing is just through the roof and I can't sell that because I don't feel right about it. If I
Right.
get a quote that's a lot cheaper than another one, I'm like, I don't want to sell them. I don't want them to go quote somewhere else and be like, oh, wow, she doesn't care. She just wants to make more money. Um, so anyway, pricing's key for me. The interesting part here, this was something I have not experienced yet, which is kind of a cool fun fact. They did they actually foil stamped inside their logo right
Okay.
here,
Yeah.
and then they added UV. So, or actually no, what they added UV around it, but they left the logo in the art. So this background where it's all printed, they left the logo there, and so the foil ended up being a smidge off from their actual logo because their art was a little bit moved on the die. And that was like the one thing that they're really unhappy with.
Mm.
So it made me like it was a good learning curve for me to be like, hey, keep an eye out in the future. If they have something that's foiling and printing, the likelihood of it being spot on pretty slim. Not impossible if they set up their files right, but when you have this many files, she had 4 application files
Yeah.
for the cover. So you just
It's
have that many layers, something's going to get bumped. Just
well, I mean, it's the when the physical files meet the thing, like the
hmm
depth of the thickness of the paper and the
yep.
texture of the rollers, like it's just yeah.
Everything changes. So, being mindful of your design versus manufacturing is also pretty cool for your own sanity. Because I feel like that is what ends up being the hardest for my clients is at the end if they get a book that just has that one thing and it
Mm,
just bugs them.
yeah.
Um, so, just
And
something interesting.
of course, it's one of those things where the you designed it so you know that it's wrong, but
Mm.
like
Nobody else sees
95% of
it.
other people even notice.
Well, that's what I told him. I said, "Oh, guys, like, because the book was already done when they found it." And
Hmm.
I said, "Honestly, nobody's gonna notice. I didn't notice, like, y'all didn't notice on the proofing or anything else until we got here." I was like, "I think it's gonna be okay." I'm like, "That is something you can easily revise on a reprint." And once again, that is something that is so hard for me to get across to people is nobody else knows.
Mm.
Nobody else knows that the cover was a little more blue or a little bit more black. Like nobody else understands that. So as long as it's within a range of what you were actually looking for and it's not like dark to the point where you can't see it, then the likelihood of your clients being okay with it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Even if they saw the art online, nobody is comparing side by side, like
Somebody
here's what my
somebody
screen.
is.
Oh, I bet there is somebody.
Somebody is.
I bet there is. But for
Um,
me, I'm like, it's pretty rare, I would assume, but I don't know. Who knows? But yeah, so basically we proofed it out. She did find some issues on the files at the end. So they did a couple of rounds of proofing. Um, and then we made a couple of changes to the quantity that they ordered and then it went into production. So basically, my side started because of all the different layers of applications. There is a lot more questions that end up coming out of projects like this because it's just, I'm educating. Because the fun part is, I've learned it all, right? I've been putting this together with them for 3 years.
mhm.
But the plant hasn't seen it at all.
Yeah.
So I'm taking a fresh project and educating that entire team on what's needed. So it's just really key to make sure my quotes are right and my files are right and all of that, because otherwise it causes confusion. Um, but anyway, we worked hard enough on this. It went through pretty easy. I did have to answer quite a few questions on just all kinds of stuff with this one. UV lineup was definitely one. Foil, they couldn't, we ended up having to change the foil at one point because the foil wasn't sticking right because they kind of went with like a textured lamination,
Hmm.
which for some reason, like one of the foils we got was just not adhering right. So at that point, they came back to me, hey, can you pick a different one out of this color? And it was all silver, so it didn't like ruin the look of the cover, but it's just
Right.
something like that that you really wouldn't know up front.
Right.
Like,
Those right.
mhm,
It's like, yeah, I talked to somebody that they have some printer recently that they have like this kind of printing and this kind of printing, and they'd never done both at the same time before. And so it was again,
mhm,
like you were saying, it's like, will this work? We don't know. Like our factory can do both, but
yeah.
like
Can they
put it
do it
through
all
one
at
machine
once?
and do it
Mhm.
through the second machine too. Like it was and I
Well,
think
and sometimes you're fighting with people that can do it and just don't want to, or are afraid that they're not going to do it right.
Right,
But there is definitely that human factor, especially at Jostens, because they are a yearbook geared company. So my commercial jobs kind of annoy them because they're all different, right? There's not like, hey, you're going to set up on foil and you're going to foil all this for the rest of the day. It's
right.
very,
It's gonna
it could
be
be pink foil, yeah.
right. It's gonna be 160 pages of blocks of photos of people.
Random. Yeah, and then you have to run it through UV, and then you have to, go back. So there definitely the human factor is still where probably what they were dealing with in that project is humans trying to figure out if they could get it all together. And sometimes
Right,
it doesn't work. I've had some where it just at the end, the cover design and the material just did not match. So sometimes we have to go back and say, hey, this was something that we didn't see coming. So here's what we're going to do instead, or what we can do. So that's always really sad for me. I hate that. So I try and learn if materials have changed. After the Rona, it was crazy. Everything started to change, and the way they actually started making paper changed. How, like, the amount of pulp in the paper has decreased since COVID,
hmm.
which makes the paper thinner, which
Sure,
changes how the ink applies. And
sure.
oh my goodness, that's been big because on reprints, I do a lot of reprints with wedding games, and when that comes back in, you want it to look the same, right?
Right.
So if your paper's a little thinner and the cover has to be adjusted a little bit, then you know that
Yeah,
it's thinner and you're
right.
paying for a thinner book, and it just, I don't know, it bugs me and it bugs everybody. And the plant, it's been big in the plant because your cover files, if they're off by a smidge, the entire cover has to be redone.
Yeah.
um, so definitely been key, that learning this business after COVID, it was almost like starting a
Well,
brand new
well,
company.
yeah, I mean that's what it sounds like. It's like there's
Hmm.
so many you can't just stop learning, I guess, because
No.
there's things that are changing
Hmm.
and I is there I mean obviously we were just kind of talking about it in like a negative way, but is there like a cool new what's the newest
Oh yeah.
thing in printing? Like I'm sure there's new stuff that like we can do this now and then
Yeah.
you can like what's the
So
newest thing that is possible?
one of the newest things I'm really excited about is a lamination that is like texturized, like really like I'm trying to think of the word for it. It's like sandpaper, like grit. It has a grit feeling to it, and it can take all of the applications that we do, which that's rare. Like there's some my scuff proof mat doesn't take my Scodex, which is my high build UV. That only so far has been able to go on like this kind of one or on soft touch mat, which is always a huge crowd pleaser, but it kind of locks you into what you have to do. And so
Right.
like this grit one is they put it on a train. Oh my goodness. I don't even know how to describe it. It was so cool because then they use UV and foil and kind of pulled out all the elements. So the grit factor, I'm really excited about. That's new. We also have a couple of laminations that are going to be metallic in their finish, which is also really unique and new. And because when laminations change, to me, like that's one of the most exciting things because lamination is not very expensive and you have to have it, right? So the difference between, well, you don't have to have it, but you want it on a
It's
cover
the
like that.
fancy looking thing. So you could print like a
Exactly.
tome or something like that that had a lock on it, and the lock part would look metallic.
Hmm.
Is that what
Yep.
you're describing?
So yeah, so there's a certain way that that when it prints, it changes color. So it basically like pulls out the color. I'm not as educated on that yet. I will be eventually, but it hasn't rolled out completely. They showed it to us in January for the first time, but I've just been itching to get my hands on some samples and pricing. So I'm like, oh, when is it going to be ours? Because we do have to wait for yearbook. That's always the hard part. They get the good stuff, and then we have to wait for them to figure out
Sure.
how to price it down to us little guys. Um, but the lamination part, to me, I think is just the coolest thing when we have changes like that
Yeah.
because it really does open a whole new world of design for my clients. And, the likelihood of somewhere else having a gritty lamination, not so good. So it kind of gives you like a different edge in the
Yeah.
market for your book at basically the same price. So that's been the cool thing for me. Um, what else? We got some new equipment, of course, always seems to come in. We're working right now on trying to get some more like foil, like printable foil. That's a new process that rolled out in China that we're trying to kind of get moved here um, and get set up because I feel like that would also be a huge savings point. It would also help with production would move faster on that because you don't have the human standing there stamping it. You don't have to wait for the dye. So I feel like that's really going to be unique when that comes in and like is fully ready to go. I see big potential for that in our type of covers, like the really unique
Yeah. Yeah.
covers, because then you're saving some money, but also not losing that, you know, metallic feel or whatever.
Foil, high
Hmm.
hologram looking stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. The once again the dimensions to your cover, because that's really the best part is having dimensions, so that way your eye goes to the different areas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pulls their eyes.
Because yeah, I mean, we always say the the cover's job is to get people to pick up the book, and
Hmm.
then that if you accomplish that, then the cover has done its job, and then you have to put some words on it that make people want to open and read it, but
Yeah.
but the covers is to like
Mhm.
stop and what is this and investigate. That's the cover's job.
And texture, I feel like, is one of the biggest things. People gravitate to the texture on a book. So even if it looks like texture, but I mean, if you think about it, cloth was our base for years.
Sure.
So to go from cloth to printed, you kind of lost some of that antique feeling, I think, that people really like, which we can still get cloth, but you want to talk about expensive, like that's that goes over here. So like even this cover material, it's a paper base.
Hmm.
And we added the texture to it and then we foil stamped it. So it was able to save a lot of money, but once again, not cloth,
Right.
not actual yeah, oh my goodness, I just lost my train of thought.
Like
Leather.
linen. Oh,
Leather.
leather. And yeah.
Leather was, that's a huge thing. Because like genuine leather, basically impossible to get anymore. Um, so that's been hard.
Yeah, I can't imagine
To
at scale.
recreate. Mm-hmm.
We did uh as a special thing, we had some of the books that we got from printed from you. Like we had them rebound in
Nice.
leather with like board and carb, but it was like a dozen. Like the
Yeah.
guy made like a dozen of them, and
Yeah.
for like the very high tier backers. But
Yes.
that was a handmade process with, I couldn't imagine the price of,
Hmm.
printing 1,500 copies of leather. Yeah, it would be, you wouldn't want to know that price.
Well, just so you know, we can do other covers. So if you guys ever wanted to do that again and kind of look at a different option, you can say, hey, we're ordering 500 books, but we need 10 of them with a really unique cover.
Mm,
How should we do that, right? And I've
yeah.
had it to where this is you all's, but where you did your paper cover
Yeah,
and your
yeah.
hard cover at the same time, then you could have added a third cover and said, hey, we want that in leather, or we want that in foil stamping, or, all that good
Right.
stuff. I have actually done up to 4 covers before on some of my
Okay.
gate companies just because they had backers that they
Right,
wanted to use
right,
different layers too. Um, so just always something cool to keep in mind because we are already doing the whole process. So it does kind of help cost wise because you're not having to reset everything up at
right.
a different facility, or maybe one that doesn't have as much access to cost effective materials maybe. So that's always a really cool side thing. A lot of people don't realize we do that. Like we
Yeah,
do.
you do. So, I can guess what your answer to this will be, but like like definitely if somebody wants to talk to you, when in the process of their book making should they come and talk to you? Uh,
I mean, really, if you want to be as proactive as possible with your cost, I would say as quickly as possible. At the very beginning stages, I am always happy to have conversations like this. I don't charge. I'm not over here like trying to micromanage projects. I'm literally here as a resource, and I can quote it, I can give you guides or not. It's your call.
right,
But I feel like the sooner the better. Strike while the iron's hot, while you're like thinking about it. Because once you've really put time and energy into it and you picked a size that you love and then you quote it and you see the pricing, that could be not as much love, right? At that
right,
point,
right,
or figuring out, is it worth cost wise to redo the files,
right,
which it hardly ever is because the amount of time and energy that goes into file setup, it's a lot. And that is
right.
one of your biggest cost factors, will be that process. So,
Sure.
um, yes, manufacturing is expensive, but I feel like design is just that is the process it takes. It's just as long as it takes that
It,
person to put it
yeah,
together. So
that
definitely,
is
I think earlier the better.
that is the answer that I was setting you up to give. So,
Yay.
uh, Kaylin, thank you so much for your time today, talking me through all this, and explaining the process and inviting people to to utilize your services. So, how can they do that if they have watched this video and they want to contact you?
Mhm.
Where's the portal for that?
Well, I have my website, which is catchy. We call it getabookprinted.com.
An
Um,
incredible title for a website.
Thank you.
Like,
I set that up myself. I'm pretty proud of it. It's like the one really techie thing I know how to do now. But that's always a good place. It has like my phone number, my email on there. Best way for me is email. I love answering emails. It gives me a point to go back to for context or further connection. So my email is kaylyn at mnkpublishing.com. So spelled just like our company. And is spelled out M and K. And
awesome.
yeah, I keep really good tabs on emails because that is how I run my company. So,
Yeah.
but I also love when people come in through my website. I get the biggest thrill out of that. And I actually do get some people that come in there. And
Well,
once again, it has the tips and tricks on there for
right.
sizing and stuff like that. If you don't want to write an email, you can just go check it out and see what it looks like.
All right. Well, again, thank you for your time. Thank you for being a great partner with us for all these years, and look forward to many more.
Well, thank you. This has been
And
huge. I'm really excited. Thank you.
and I want to thank all the viewers for watching.
Yes. Thank you guys putting up with us chit chatting. It's always fun.